We have three here from Liberty IT, one of our diamond sponsors today. And starting with Brian Craig, he's the Senior Director of Architecture at Liberty IT. He leads the architecture team, focusing on the evolution of Liberty IT's engineering practices. We also have Yuan Zhang, an intern software engineer at Liberty IT. He's committed to the local tech committee and actually an organizer at the NIDC. We also have Saurab Chandel, a principal software engineer at Liberty IT with over 15 years of IT experience. He's witnessed the evolution of technology from syntax to logic. And we're going to hear about GitHub Copilot, a tool that uses AI technology to suggest code to developers. And IT Liberty's team have actually had an experiment to determine whether Copilot was worth using. So we're all very keen to hear the results of their experiment and how they found it along the way. Pass over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to the talk. Again, Gen AI and Gen AI related solutions are pretty big. In fact, there's this talk I'm doing with my colleagues on GitHub Copilot, and then directly after this, I think there's another talk on Amazon Code Whisperer and how it can be used. But again, it is a hot topic, particularly how it's going to impact the engineering practices of, well, everybody in the industry. So, without further ado, really, when we sort of started looking at Copilot, there has been a lot written by the thought leaders in the industry, and it's very hit and miss. And really, the thinking was, what experience will you have, and more importantly, will your colleagues have when they first start using Copilot, and how do we make that experience better if we actually decide there's value? Again, these are the sort of two pictures I've been messing around with DALL-E and putting in descriptions. So the one on the left is whenever you have two Copilots fighting, and the one on the right is whenever things are just working for you. I actually got that out of the same prompt, and the one on the right is, are you going to be able to bring in Copilot and just put your feet up and relax? Or is it going to be adversarial between you and the machine? So a little bit of context about why we needed to do an experiment around GitHub Copilot. We work for Liberty Mutual Insurance, and the entire tech department is about 5,000. 3,500 of those are engineers, and then we have probably a few more hundred data scientists. So if you do the maths, that's close to 4,000 people who would be looking to use GitHub Copilot at about $20 a seat per month. So that's a cool $1 million a year in licensing costs if you roll this out to everybody. So again, before you start committing to that type of spend, you want to understand, is it going to be a force for good, or is it actually going to slow down your engineers and your data scientists when they're doing stuff? So Liberty IT, we are based in Ireland. We've now over 500, 600 staff based Belfast, Dublin and Galway. But we model ourselves as Liberty Mutual software house. So therefore we look at how do we advance the engineering, not just within Liberty IT in Ireland, but also Liberty Mutual across the globe in their technology departments. A little bit of background. So AI augmented software development, for a long time there's sort of been two different parts to this. There's the generative AI sort of chat buddies, so ChatGPT is the most obvious one, and then you have the tooling that's built into your IDE. So GitHub Copilot for most of its life has fallen into the second one, but just in the last sort of 2 or 3 months they launched what they called GitHub Copilot X, and they're now rebranding as GitHub Copilot Chat. So that's the ability not just to, whenever you're sort of putting in a comment, it starts to throw up prompts into your code, but also having a side panel where you can actually start chatting with it. As I sort of touched on already, other options are available. This is a list of what we've seen sort of come out to the market in the last 2 or 3 years. Code Whisperer is another one. Like I say, you can hear about that in the next talk. JetBrains also have one. Where's Gareth? No, he's not here. So, but they all work the same sort of way. They all use that OpenAI model that's been trained on different code bases, and then they link into whatever you send it from a context perspective, and again with GitHub Copilot, it's all about what other files do you have open in your IDE? In other words, what are in your other tabs? And then what suggestions or prompts do you send to it? So we were required to do an experiment within Liberty. Why? Because this is a generative AI solution, and with that it falls underneath the need to do a responsible AI process. So it's all about having that commitment to AI driven by ethical principles. So with that, our responsible AI committee asked us to present to them. They also brought in our legal team, because the other thing to think about whenever you're using any of these Gen AI solutions is you have to send it stuff, and quite often you're sending it outside of your company. And if it's proprietary code, that's pretty, makes people very nervous. So you probably can't read it there, but that text there is the extra clause we had to get into the GitHub Copilot contract to ensure that if any code was sent to them, it was encrypted on the way out. They used it to be able to find suggestions, and they immediately deleted it from their servers. There was no opportunity for them to learn from it. That's what GitHub Copilot do. It's owned by Microsoft, so therefore they are used to dealing with commercial customers. Some of the smaller ones that are sort of new in market, I suspect that's what they're looking for with early adopters, is to make the most of what you send it. So this was our hypothesis. I think it's what everybody is thinking about in the industry. Using GitHub Copilot to improve time to market. You know, we want to increase engineering productivity, we want the application code quality to be improved, and equally we want to have job satisfaction. So we agreed these measurements, sort of broken up under those different headings. So for the engineering productivity, it was really about Copilot acceptance rate, team velocity, and the pull request acceptance rate. The code quality, luckily we use SonarQube within Liberty, so that immediately could jump on that to be able to see how that changed. And then one of the other indicators is your pull request size. Smaller tends to be better. And unfortunately, nobody has been able to read engineers' minds, so we still have to do the odd survey to find out what the satisfaction is from our action engineers from using it. So our participants, we only had 100 licenses. That's what GitHub provided us to do the trial. So we distributed them across a number of different tech stacks, from TypeScript to Node. We had a surprisingly large number of people who were using Python, and that's because we had a mix of data scientists plus people who were writing their Lambdas in Python in the cloud native space. We also had a small number of C# developers, and probably more on that later about what they found out. And then, yeah, plenty of Java people. The experiment itself was 6 weeks in duration. It's actually still ongoing. We are just starting week 6 next week. But we had to bring them in. We had to advise them on which IDE to use. We've got there you'll see the Copilot code telemetry, and I'll have a slide on that towards the end where you'll see just how much information Copilot itself, or rather GitHub itself, can give you, but only if you're using Visual Studio, VS Code, or JetBrains, which tend to be still quite popular, but you'll still get people using other stuff which you don't get as much rich information whenever you're trying to run your experiment. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to pass over to my colleagues who are going to talk about their experiences of hands-on using Copilot.
Good morning, guys. The mic is working fine. Good. It helps me. So my name is Saurab Chandel. I am working as an engineer with Liberty IT. For the past 3 or 4 years, I have been working with LexBot technologies, where our prime focus is to self-serve the customers in filing their claims and trying to process when they are calling us, try to make the processing time, reduce the processing time, and if we can self-service them, we will self-service them. Otherwise, we will transfer them to the agents. Yeah.
Hi folks, my name is Yuan. I'm an intern software engineer at Liberty IT. I actually just joined the company 4 months ago, and it has been fantastic. So besides that, I'm also one of the organizers of NIDC. And you know what's a funny thing? This is actually my first time to be on this stage. And to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous, okay? So you know what, just like Adele song, go easy on me, okay? So yeah, during our experiment, we break it down to different points to show me to you folks. So one thing is that for the improved speed and efficiency. So sometimes when we are working on some tickets, do you know what? Boilerplate code needs to be written, and let's face it, it's not fun and can be a bit annoying sometimes. So what I found about Copilot is that it does a really great job for generating boilerplate code. Like for example, though, when you are doing writing some unit tests, right? Some assertions that literally copy and paste, and it's really handy when you're using Copilot. You just hit tab and accept it, And another thing is that for generating unit tests, this is actually one of my favorite features of Copilot, okay? I remember when I joined Chatty, which is the team I'm in right now, the full name is Chatty Macheface. How original, isn't it? So yeah, at that time when I joined, I didn't know the team's the test coverage was really high. At that time, if I remember correctly, it was something like 95%. But the thing is that at that time, I don't know much about unit tests. It's something that I didn't learn in university, but I do believe that university should teach students about that. So during in our innovation sprint, I did a POC about Copilot to see how we can utilize it to benefit us for development. One thing I found is that it does a really great job for generating unit tests.
Sorry, guys, I am a little bit pessimist here, and we all should be pessimistic when we are adopting new technologies. So, Yuan, you were saying that it helps you in generating unit tests, it helps you with the boilerplate code, but what about the code accuracy as well as authenticity of the code? And I'm thinking that you will have to spend too much time in validating the code also.
Yeah, you're right, it's not perfect, what I'm saying? And it's not correct sometimes. That is a fact, When you're using a tool like that, manual judgment will always be required when you're using it. And also, but you think it in a different side, though. When you're using Copilot to generate unit tests, it will only take you a few seconds to generate workable test skeletons for you to work on. That's pretty handy to me,
Perfect, okay.
Another thing is that for the analysis and interpretation. So our team Chatty, we manage a lot of different repos, and it takes time to to understand different code base. And I like to use one of the chat feature thing, which is code explain. I like to use it a lot to actually just see what is this class doing or what this function is actually doing, to just give me a quick overview, a quick understanding about it. Also, another thing is that for the chat feature, which is you can just ask the question, that's really cute because it's embedded with your IDE. So that's really handy, And I don't know, does it happen to you folks? So, sometimes when you have some holiday, you know what I'm saying? After a week of holiday, when you come back to work, you forgot how to use Git command, I don't know, does it happen to you folks too? So, yeah, I like to just use the chat, the chat feature there to just ask some questions because it does save me some time to look up on different places.
Okay, I'm still not convinced here. Many people in this hall will be thinking that you can do the same thing by Googling as well as going to the Stack Overflow. And moreover, I think when you are in the Stack Overflow, there are validation also because other developers would have gone through all that code. So what about that?
Yeah, that's right. Of course, you can always go on to different platforms to search for answers, something like that. But one thing we should know is that even when you use the chat features in Copilot is that you ask some question, right? It gives you the response. Does it mean it's correct? No, it does not. You still need your own judgment to validate the solution that it provided to you. And you know what? It's the same happen to Stack Overflow or whatever other platforms, Just because it had a lot of likes on it, it doesn't mean it's right, You need to spend your own time to interpret that. Perfect. Yeah, and another thing is the AI pair programming, or you can just phrase it interactive collaboration, okay? Which way you want, So, think about in today's, a hybrid work environment. Many of us, we do appreciate the balance of connection and autonomy, But when I'm still navigating my way in the team, sometimes I just have a lot of questions. And it's not feasible to have my colleagues on standby, to answer every questions that I had, But when you're using Copilot, it does make me feel more, how to put it this way, comfortable in a way.
Oh, but that is interesting that you mentioned pair programming here. But then again, I'm skeptical because you are guiding the Copilot. It is your thought process. You are prompting it. So it is not going to contradict you like a live person. If he's pair programming with you, he's going to ask you questions. He's going to contradict you in between. He's going to give his own suggestions. What about that?
Well, I don't think it does contradict me. You know, I mean, again, just like what I mentioned before, like you still need your manual judgment to validate the, response. But the thing is that if you're thinking on a different side, you know, using Copilot, it's not only going to give you instant feedback, you know, but also add a dynamic touch to your solo programming session, you know, when you do it at home. It's just made the experience more engaging.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing is that since I'm just joining the company, I just finished my second year, and I'm in my placement year right now. You know, sometimes I don't have much experience in languages like Python. You know, it's some language that I'm not familiar with. But when when we need to use those stacks, and I'm using Copilot with it, it does make me feel more comfortable and more confident.
No, I agree on that part. But what about those particular developers which belong to that particular community where the open source code is not that much?
Yeah, it does a good job, you know, with very common languages like JavaScript, Java, C#, Python, whatever, you know. There's a lot of language like that with lots of open source code on GitHub, you know. But it does show weakness on some niche language like Zig, you know, or frameworks like Svelte. It does have some problem with that. And during our experiment, we had some very interesting findings that we'd like to share. Okay, so the first thing is that if you're writing JavaScript with Airbnb, ESLint rules, which it considers using the for loop as an arrow, Copilot would actually happily suggest you offending codes.
Perfect. And I was really impressed while I was working on a production code. There was some bash script which was giving us an issue, and I have not worked quite a lot with the bash script. And I was really impressed. I just opened up that particular script in my IDE, and it was able to suggest me that why this particular script is giving me errors, and I was also able to read the context that this is the better way of writing this particular bash script. So yeah, it played part there.
Yeah, another interesting finding is that it will only, like when you're using the chat feature, it will only respond to programming-related questions. This is actually a funny story behind it, okay? So one evening, I was using Copilot chat, and I was like, just a little bit curious, okay? I'm just gonna ask something. I remember I was asking, I don't know, can you give me some advice to annoy my husband, you know? And that respond back only can answer to programming-related questions. So, you know, Gary, you dodged a bullet there, you know? You're welcome.
At least I will give it that it is working for Gary, at least Copilot. So good. So yeah, I think when I was trying to play around with this Copilot, one thing you will also notice that when it runs out of suggestions, it goes into a kind of a loop. And it will, after some time, it will hallucinate and it will try to annoy you. So yeah, if it is running out of ideas, it will be kind of something which will be annoying you too much. So this is something you need to be mindful while using this tool. Also, while working, we also realized that if you are working on some green project, this tool really works wonders, because it can read the context very easily, because your context is very small, so it can go through the context. But if you are working on some big production live codes, it will always struggle. Other thing is that I think right now their capacity is they can only go through 800 lines of code or something to make a context when you are working on the IDE. So if you are thinking that it will read everything which is sitting in your pipeline, it will read everything and then give you suggestions, that is not going to happen. So right now, there are limitations that the context that it can read and give you suggestions is limited right now. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing I found is that it's actually a really recent finding, though, and actually works well with TDD. That was actually like early this week. I was in a testing excellence workshop, and then it was introduced in TDD. At that time, I did not turn the Copilot off. I forgot about that. And then, so while I was like learning the approach, is that I found it works really well with the TDD approach. So if anybody in here are looking to adopt TDD approach, you know what? Try it with Copilot. I think you might enjoy it.
I will definitely give it a try. I am very bad with TDD. Guys, I don't think I need to introduce this guy to you. This is Mr. Uncle Bob. And as you can see, you should name a variable using the same care with which you name your firstborn child. And I think this is one of the limitations that I found while working with Copilot is that it is very, very vague with your names. So you need to be mindful, again, with the names. At least Uncle Bob will not be happy with Copilot. OK, let's move into some other aspects of Copilot.
Yeah, so when you're looking to adopt tool like this, especially like for enterprise use, there's something you need to take into consideration. Forget about the functionality, those kind of side, you know what I'm saying? What about the cost? This is one thing that you have to consider about that also. So Copilot is actually user license-based and instead of like a ChatGPT, which is like token-based. And another thing is that for the outdated and faulty code, like if you are using some library or languages that actually like, update quite frequent, it does will provide you outdated code. That is the thing. Another thing is that you should be mindful about is the legal issue and ethic issue of Copilot. Yeah, we're not going to dive in that too much, OK? It's going to be like a rabbit hole, you know? And you know what? It's not 5 o'clock yet. I don't have a pie on my hand to talk about that. So yeah, but please do your own research before adopting tool like this.
OK, guys, now going with some of the observations while we were working on this tool for past 1 month. So first thing is, Copilot is going to be as good as you are going to be with your prompts. So it opens a complete new dimension of prompt engineering, which we definitely need to delve into because Gen AI is coming. And down the line, I think more better you are with your prompts, more better results will be coming back to you. Secondly, when you are going to try this tool, this is a kind of a tip that always try this tool first with the languages which you are familiar with, and then slowly go into the languages which you are not unfamiliar with, which is linked to my third point that while you are adopting this tool, you need to have that capability of recognizing when this tool is working fine and when this tool is not going to work fine, because you cannot take whatever it is giving you always have to take it with a pinch of salt right now, and you have to be mindful of whether you need to accept it or not. And especially your new developers will be using this tool, so especially for the developers who have good level of experience, they will always have to keep an eye on your new developers. And the fourth thing was that while using this tool, what I was finding is that it is kind of very enthusiastic tool while you are coding. It will try to immediately jump while you are thinking. Also, it will jump immediately. Sometimes you will be in a state that you feel like that it is a kind of a noisy, quirky tool. But believe me, when you keep using it, it helps to your efficiency, it helps to your productivity. And I will even go further in saying this, that we cannot shy away from the reality. This is coming at a very fast pace, so it is better to embrace this right now. And the most important question which everybody is thinking in the mind right now in the hall as well as everywhere else, because this has been hyped a lot, that is it going to replace the developers? I cannot predict the future, guys, but with my usage of 1 month and after reading through the articles and all those, having the experience of other people, no, it is not going to replace us. The reason why it is not going to replace us is that I do agree that down the line, this tool is going to be better and better and better, and the efficiency of producing the code quality, and all those things will improve. But the main thing is what needs to be coded and what not needs to be coded will always be coming from the developers. And I don't think in the foreseeable future right now that it is going to be replaced, because developers bring more rather than just writing simple code.
Thank God, still can keep my job, you know.
Okay, thanks, guys. So back to me to sort of give you the results of our experiments so far. So like I said, it hasn't wrapped up yet, but what we have here, and I know this is a bit of an eye chart, but this is the telemetry that GitHub Copilot will give you. It's currently in beta, which means every Friday somebody in GitHub takes a screenshot and emails it to Liberty so that we can see how our 100, although if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, 74 plus 23, how's our 97 engineers that are using VS Code and JetBrains, how they're doing? Because again, like I said, if you're not using those editors, you won't get the richness of data. One of the things to call out, the overall acceptance rate is actually lower than 30%. That's because that takes into account the fact that it's all the language that people have tried it with in the experiment. So for the likes of Python, and again I have this in the next slide, it's already a 31% acceptance rate. Java's up there at 28.9, JavaScript's at 28.31. But people went off and tried it also with YAML, with TypeScript, React. There's even GitHub Actions workflow. It has a lot of uses, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why Liberty went after GitHub Copilot. It was because of the range of languages it could support, and we do have quite a diverse tech stack. So, into more of the detail. So this is the results we have so far. So I called out the acceptance, and again, we are pretty much interested in the Python, the Java, and the JavaScript, because that tends to be the majority of our languages. And although we were looking for greater than 30%, we very quickly realized that how GitHub Copilot works is it's constantly prompting you as you're typing, which means it sends you a lot of crap that you're not interested in. But once you are interested in it, then you start to see people accepting it. So although we're below what we wanted in the 30%, we can understand why, and we're okay with that. We're still waiting for our team velocity results, but from a pull request, we've actually seen commit volume a 10% uplift. Code quality, we don't have the Sonar Cube through yet, but we have actually observed a 4% uplift in our test coverage. I think this is a prime example of not many people enjoy writing tests, but if Copilot can support you and enable in doing that, then you're going to see more tests written, and we'll also be looking to see what the quality of those are. From a job satisfaction perspective, we've seen plenty of positive feedback in the surveys that we've been doing week to week. And if I go to the next slide, you can start to see, this is a summary from those surveys. So the summary, not surprisingly, is that the engineers do love it. They do find it an effective tool. Some of the things that they're saying is that the less context switching, in other words, jumping to Google something or to Stack Overflow and staying in the IDE, is certainly an improvement. The ease is improving. When we rolled out the chat feature instead of just the standard feature, again, there was another uplift in the satisfaction. And they also feel, the developers feel there's an increase in their speed of delivery, but we want to see what the metrics tell us at the end of the experiment. So the plan is to roll out GitHub Copilot across Liberty Mutual Technology. So again, that's like 3,500 engineers plus our data scientist teams. And across the bottom, you'll see some of the different comments. So again, I'm going to try to summarize what the guys already said. When you roll this out, one day developers will tell you they hate it because it's frustrating, it's confounding, it's not predictable, and the next day they say they love it. And it probably comes down to what tech stack they're working in, whether they're doing something that they're not an expert in already. But again, bear with them and help them through. As I touched on, it is unpredictable. It's very hard to do demos in Copilot because once you've done one demo, it learns from it. So the next results will be different from the first time you actually did the test. We do need to embrace the tooling. It's how we get faster and better as an engineering community, but you can't trust it. It's like everything. It will hallucinate, and it's not in my slide deck, but there actually was an incident this week where there's a particular hallucination coming out of GitHub Copilot where it names a library that doesn't exist. Well, somebody's been kind enough to actually create that library, but for nefarious purposes. So GitHub Copilot suggests a library, you select it to actually pull it in, and then you get somebody's code who's deliberately doing that to attack your actual code base. That's a little bit scary. You will need to upskill yourself with prompt engineering. You're going to hear that a lot across all the different talks with GenAI, but it is the future, and you need to understand how do you get the most out of any of those GenAI tools. One of the things we're now starting to look at is as our engineers get faster at writing the code and writing the tests, does that change our skill mix within our individual teams? Liberty, we're probably one product owner to 5 or 4 engineers. Are we going to see it one product owner to 2 or 3 engineers? So we actually have more teams, but that means we need more product owners because, again, it's back to understanding the problem, and then GitHub Copilot will help you solve it quicker with code. And finally, as the guy said, again, The left-hand picture, I plugged into DALL-E, give me a robot that's writing Java code. Prime example of, it didn't even spell the word Java right. So it will need a human in the loop. But the person who will take your job is somebody who comes along and embraces this tooling, because unfortunately, they will be faster than you and more productive than you over time. And with that, I think that's a wrap.
Thank you. Again, very much appreciated you coming together and how you presented the results of your experiment and how you approached it and your learnings. Now opening up to Q&As from the floor. If you raise your hand, Olivia will bring a mic to you. First question here. Thank you.
Morning. Thank you. Very interesting. Juan, I have a question for you. Where you are in your developer journey, do you believe that Copilot will make you complacent in your future learning?
So, could you just complacent in?
As in, would you rely on Copilot more than going and finding out truth, documentation, that kind of scenario?
I think the ease of use will see people slip into that trap. I probably stood on the stage last year and talked very much about engineering foundations and the importance that Copilot is an enabler, but if you don't have the foundations, you're going to write a lot of crap code, and that's going to cause us all problems in the future. So it has to be paired with having good engineering discipline, and we have a separate effort and complementary effort. It's one of the things we haven't, I actually should have put in the slides. The other purpose of the experiment was to determine what is the best practice we are going to eat it whenever we roll this out to all of our engineers, particularly about what training they need to have, and some of that is actually the ethical training and the actually understanding the security side of it. The other is ensuring that they understand the engineering discipline. I had it in one of my line items. We ensured that anybody in an experiment, they had to have branch protection on their code so that no one person could send their code to production. Anything coming in needed to have another set of eyes on it. But again, it's a genuine concern because engineers by their nature want to take the fastest route, so therefore there's that risk that we'll just rely on this too much and not do our own research.
And frankly, I think right now, while experimenting with this tool, I don't think it is at that level that it will lead into that complacency thing. And that is where that experienced developers guiding the junior developers come in to play, that you always have to see whenever the code is getting in. As Brian was mentioning, the branch protection rules should be there, that they cannot merge the code into production straight away. You have to, again going back to that point, that this tool is very good, but that capability of recognizing when this tool is not good will always be there. You have to be mindful of those things. So no, I think down the line things can happen, and we will have to keep an eye on those.
And maybe just to finish off, on your stage, in career development, what do you think?
Well, what I think about it is that, yes, it's handy, have it there, right? But however, when I was keep talking about is that manual judgment. You need to verify that, you know what I'm saying, like that. Even when you go online, you go to Stack Overflow, it shows you the answer, right? It shows you one of the solutions. Of course, you will go to other searching platforms to try to find some other documents to back that up, So I don't think that will actually change too much about that part, It would just be how to put it this way. It just helped me to say sometimes for some context switching, but you still have to search to verify the solution, is it adaptable or not?
I will just like to add on this, sorry. Before we move, the biggest benefit that we have seen with Copilot is the context switching that you don't have to do, because otherwise you always keep jumping. The chat feature that comes with Copilot is really very impressive.
Thank you, and thanks for that question. Any other questions just behind there, Olivia?
Yeah, so I just have a question around the advantage I'd see from Copilot is to accelerate the process of development, being able to trust the code that comes out of it and then being able to use it easily. The last thing I want as an experienced developer is to go off and then refactor it again and again. So have you seen that during your experimentation that you can reliably reproduce the same thing and over, which you can then trust?
So was this question regarding the, I didn't get the full question, but was it regarding to the refactoring of the code and stuff like that?
No, reliably getting it to reproduce what you want from it. As in, if I'm going to create a template that I want to use again and again, if I ask it, is it reliably able to produce something that I can trust over time?
At this point, I would say no. But actually, we're now finding it's more related to the prompt engineering side, in that you're having to get smarter at how you ask the question and how you ask the prompt and be more specific to get exactly what you want. It is a really good general helper, but one of the things that disturbed us when we were trying to pull together demos is you would type something in and something new would come out, and then you do it again and something new would come out. And maybe when you're coding as an individual, that's okay, but to your point, it starts to disturb if you can't get that predictability. I'm used to predictability. I'm used to writing tests that it passes because the same result comes out. So that's something we have to get our heads around. But to me, it'll probably be solved through better prompt engineering to ensure you tell it what you need. But again, whenever you scale it up to tens, 20s, hundreds of developers, you've now got to train them to have the prompt knowledge to be able to do that. Otherwise, you'll all get a different slight flavor. Again, back to the best practice, we are looking to go, you have to have your linters, so the formatting is set up the way you want. There are so many other tools you need alongside this, so that your code base doesn't diverge into this scatterbrain that actually becomes unmaintainable over time. Again, it allows you to write code really fast, but it'll allow you to write shit code even faster.
Any other questions?
Hi, you mentioned boilerplate code and it generating unit tests and being used for TDD. Is it actually smart enough to spot edge cases, or is it just
some.
pure?
In my opinion, I would say for covering edge cases, just some. In some circumstances only, and sometimes it just doesn't cover at all. But that is the thing, though. You can't rely on it will cover all the edge cases. You will still have to do your own research to find about what could happen. You know what I'm saying? That is something that you need to bear in mind about that. But once you have those contacts with it, though, it actually does a really good job for the auto-completion side. So it will save you a bit of time.
And just going with this, what we have seen while our experiment was that suppose you are writing a unit test for a particular file, the best practice at that time will be open that particular file, which is having the logic in the IDE, and then ask it to write the unit test for it. What happens is, down the line, it will take that context which is open in the IDE, send it over, and then it will come with the better results. So yeah, this was some of the things that we had experienced.
Thank you. I think next question.
I'm really interested in using ChatGPT to help educate developers. So my question is, do you think there's potential for it to teach developers what you were talking about yourself, this engineering discipline?
There is. I suppose I would put it back to the prompt engineering challenge of you need to tell it what you need, and you need to be quite specific so you get back what you want to have. And again, from a scale perspective, it's okay if you're in a small team because you can talk about it. When you're looking at doing it for hundreds or thousands of developers, you then have to sort of set out what's the best practice. And again, it's generally, here's the basics that we have for you. Then people can start to self-serve by going and seeking. What it starts to bring in is the fact that you can have your own personalized training journey. We do custom tuning journeys, but sometimes individuals know more about one thing or another. So it is certainly, I see it helping in that way. But the other thing that we're consciously thinking about is how soon will we get to a place where we can start teaching it on our own stuff? The own learning resources we recommend people to use. When is it going to be cost effective to do that? Because right now, any of the training stuff costs thousands, and you don't know if you're going to get the return. But yeah, certainly what we're seeing.
I think we've maybe time for one more question. front row.
Hey, excuse me. Has there been any limitations? Obviously, it deals specifically with programming questions, but have you found any limitations on your domain having an effect on being able to ask certain questions? So, say, I need a for loop, that would be quite straightforward, but have you noticed any limitations where you need to extend beyond just the for loop and having an awareness of your domain?
Probably understand it slightly differently. I touched on, I never got back to it, the C#. We have one set of tech stack that's C#. They find far worse results than our Java developers and our JavaScript. You know, they were just saying that there's not as much C# code out there for any of the models to learn from. There's still a lot of it, but there's not as much. So therefore, they were finding far less use of it or less value from it. So yes, there's definitely limitations. We talked about, well, maybe we can call them niche language, but any of the newer languages, there's not enough out there for things to learn from. So you do find domain limitations. We also had a particular one where, particularly when you get into some of the security and you want to have encryption on from the start, they just don't have examples for that and from what the model has learned from. So very quickly you go, okay, I'm going to have to actually do the research myself. I can't use it directly from it. I don't know if you guys have any.
And even I think when we were experimenting with the CDK also, it was just coming back with very outdated, because you have to keep in mind if the languages and frameworks are changing quite frequently, this is not behaving as good right now. They are promising that good uplift is coming with this Copilot 4, which I think they are terming as Copilot X right now, but they will be changing the name down the line. But they are promising much better results with that. But right now what we have seen is, I have especially seen with the CDK, it was not working as good because it was coming with the results back, but they were old libraries which are not that much great right now.
Yeah, it's a little bit mapped to what we were saying earlier for the outdated, like O40 code, you know. And also, if you are working on niche language, you know, like Six or framework like Svelte, something like that, you know, where the community is not as big as the others, you know what I'm saying? There's not that many code bases out there. Yeah, at those cases, I will just say, like, you know, no need to bother. You know what I'm saying? If your tech stack is very niche, I don't think this tool will really benefit you. But if your tech stack has some very common stuff, you know, React or JavaScript, Java, etc., something like that, then it will do a good job. But if it's not, then no.
Thank you. That brings to a conclusion our Q&A session. But if you do have questions, and I know I wasn't able to get to everyone today, I suggest that you reach out directly through socials, through LinkedIn. We obviously know the expertise and so much to share. So thank you again, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.